The 911 operator in the Bronx Dispatch Center heard it at exactly 3:42 a.m. Not words, screaming. Background screaming, the kind that comes from many throats at once, the kind that climbs in pitch until it just stops. The caller, male voice shaking, managed only 5 words before the line went dead. Southern Boulevard. They're burning. Please. 47 seconds of audio. On the tape, you can hear it, that wall of sound, human voices recognizing what's about to happen. Then silence. Perfect. Absolute silence. Before we go any further, you need to know what this is and what it isn't. The Happy Land fire happened. March 25th, 1990. 87 people died in that stairwell on Southern Boulevard. That number is real. The building is real, the neighborhood is real. The failure of city inspectors to enforce fire codes that already existed, documented, verified, on the public record. What you're about to hear is a reconstruction. The interior lives of the people in this story, their conversations, the specific words they said to each other in the hours before that night, what they thought and felt and remembered, those are built, constructed from court testimony, from investigative records, from the accounts of people who lived in that community and survived that era. The characters of Lydia and Julio, as you'll hear them, are fictional, composites shaped by real history, not transcripts of real people. This story exists to entertain, to educate, and to make sure the conditions that made March 25th possible are never forgotten. Because those conditions, the poverty, the invisible communities, the city agencies that looked the other way, those didn't die in 1990. They just moved. The South Bronx didn't sleep, exactly. It just got quieter after 2 a.m., when the last subway trains rattled past and the bodegas locked their security gates. Southern Boulevard between East Tremont and 178th Street was a corridor of survival. Check cashing spots, 99-cent stores, Pentecostal churches sharing walls with numbers runners. The storefronts told you everything. Hand-painted signs in Spanish, security bars on every window, apartments stacked above businesses where families slept 3 to a bedroom. This was immigrant America in 1990, the kind the politicians never visited, the kind that worked 2 jobs and sent money back to San Pedro Sula or Santo Domingo and didn't ask for much except to be left alone. Happy Land Social Club occupied the 2nd floor of 1959 Southern Boulevard. Not a club, really, more like someone's fantasy of what a club should be. No liquor license, no fire exits, no sprinkler system. Just a long rectangular room with a makeshift bar at one end, a DJ booth at the other, and enough space for maybe 120 people if you packed them tight. The walls were painted dark red, the kind of red that hid stains and scuff marks. Christmas lights strung across the ceiling year-round, 2 bathrooms with doors that didn't lock, windows covered with blackout curtains because the place opened at 10 p.m. and didn't close until dawn, and nobody wanted the neighbors, or the cops, counting heads. You reached Happy Land by climbing a narrow wooden stairwell from street level. Single door at the bottom, another at the top. 21 steps, each one creaking under the weight of Saturday night. The stairs smelled like cigarettes and spilled beer and the particular musk of old wood that's absorbed decades of human traffic. No handrail, the walls close enough to brush both shoulders if you were broad. At the top landing, you paid your $5 to whoever was working the door, usually a cousin or nephew of Elias Colon, the owner, and pushed through into sound and heat and bodies. Saturday nights were sacred. Merengue and salsa and bachata pumping through speakers that distorted on the bass hits, making the whole floor vibrate. The DJ, Luis something, nobody remembers his last name, played the hits from home. Juan Luis Guerra, Wilfrido Vargas, old Celia Cruz. Music that made factory workers and housekeepers and construction laborers forget they'd worked 60 hours that week for $4.25 an hour. The crowd was mostly Honduran, some Dominican, a few Guatemalan families who'd made the trek north. Ages ranged from 19 to 60. On a good night, you'd see 3 generations. Grandmothers in folding chairs against the wall, mothers dancing with daughters, fathers teaching sons the old steps. Everyone knew everyone, or knew someone who knew everyone. This was community, the kind built in the margins when nobody else wants you. The neighborhood around Happy Land had its own rhythm, its own rules. Corner stores stayed open until 3 a.m., selling single cigarettes for a quarter, loose joints for $2. The elevated train line running above Jerome Avenue cast shadows that never fully lifted, even at noon. Graffiti covered every available surface. Not the artistic kind that would later be celebrated in galleries, but territorial markings, memorials to the dead, declarations of love that rarely lasted. Police cruised through, but rarely stopped unless called. This was 1990, peak crack epidemic, and the NYPD had bigger problems than an illegal social club where immigrants danced to music from home. The buildings on Southern Boulevard were mostly pre-war construction. Brick facades weathered to a dark brown, fire escapes zigzagging down exterior walls like crooked ladders. Many had been beautiful once, in the 1920s and 30s, when the Bronx was still considered respectable, before white flight and disinvestment turned whole neighborhoods into warehouses for the poor. You could still see traces of that earlier era if you looked. Art Deco flourishes above doorways, ornate cornices crumbling but still elegant, lobbies with marble floors buried under decades of institutional linoleum. Happyland's building was one of these, built in 1928, converted to commercial use in 1962, subdivided and re-subdivided until the original floor plan became unrecognizable. Lydia Feliciano Rodriguez worked the coat check, though coat check was generous, really just a corner near the entrance where people dumped their jackets on a folding table, and Lydia tried to keep track with a system of numbered tickets she'd made herself. She was 29, born in Tegucigalpa, been in New York since '86. Thin face, high cheekbones, hair pulled back tight because it was easier for work. 2 jobs, coat check on weekends, hotel maid in Midtown Monday through Friday. She sent $200 home every month to her mother and 2 younger siblings. Lived in a studio on Prospect Avenue with a hot plate and a Murphy bed and a window that looked onto a brick wall. She was saving for citizenship. $200 for the application, another $120 for the English test. She had $287 in a coffee can under the sink. People liked Lydia. She remembered names, asked about kids, kept bottles of Tylenol in her purse because she knew how hangovers worked. If you needed a favor, cover a shift, borrow $10 until payday, store something in her coat check corner for safekeeping, Lydia said yes. This mattered in a place like Happyland, where trust was currency and reputation was everything. She'd worked there for 3 years, since 1987, when her cousin Rosa had gotten her the job. The pay was cash, $50 a night plus tips, which usually added another $20 or $30. Not much, but it paid her Con Edison bill and kept her in groceries. Rice, beans, chicken backs from the Bravo supermarket on 149th Street. She ate the same thing most nights, rice and beans with hot sauce, maybe an egg if she was feeling extravagant. Saved everything else. Julio González didn't work at Happyland. He used to be a regular, back when he and Lydia were together. That relationship, if you could call 3 months of intensity and 9 months of slow collapse a relationship, had ended 3 weeks ago. Lydia's decision. Julio hadn't taken it well. Julio was 36, Cuban, arrived in the Mariel boat lift in 1980 when Castro emptied the prisons and mental hospitals and let anyone who wanted to leave go to Florida. Julio had been 26 then, young enough to believe New York meant something better. 10 years later, he was working odd shifts at a warehouse in Hunts Point when he could find work, collecting unemployment when he couldn't. He lived in a basement room on Fox Street, the kind with a separate entrance and a ceiling you couldn't fully stand under if you were over 6 feet. Julio was 5 feet 9 inches. He drank Presidente beer from the bodega, 4 or 5 a night, more on weekends. He had no family in the US, no close friends, no plan beyond next week. His basement room was 8 feet by 12 feet, with a narrow window at street level that looked out onto the sidewalk. He could see people's shoes walking past, sneakers, work boots, high heels on Saturday nights. A mattress on the floor, no frame, a milk crate for a nightstand. A hot plate he rarely used because cooking for one person felt pointless. His clothes hung from a rope stretched between 2 exposed pipes. The bathroom was upstairs, shared with 3 other tenants, and the hot water worked maybe half the time. Rent was $225 a month, paid in cash to a landlord he'd met exactly once. The room smelled like mildew and old concrete, the kind of smell that gets into your clothes and hair and follows you everywhere. What he did have was obsession, the kind that grows in isolation, that feeds on silence and repetition, and the stories you tell yourself about why things went wrong. Lydia had broken it off after Julio showed up at her hotel job unannounced, twice in 1 week, waiting in the lobby until her shift ended. She'd told him clearly, it was over. Don't come to the club, don't call, don't wait outside her building. Julio had nodded, said he understood. He didn't understand. On March 24th, 1990, Julio spent the afternoon drinking. Not at a bar, he didn't have money for bars, but in his basement room, sitting on the edge of his mattress with a paper bag of Presidente tall boys. By 11 p.m., he'd finished 5. The thoughts that had been circling for 3 weeks tightened into focus. Lydia was at Happy Land. Lydia was there every Saturday. If he went, maybe she'd talk to him. Maybe she'd see reason. Maybe she'd remember what they'd had. He'd spent the 3 weeks since the breakup in a spiral. Called the payphone in Lydia's building 17 times. He kept count, scratching marks on the wall next to his mattress. Her cousin Rosa answered most of them, voice progressively colder each time. She doesn't want to talk to you. Stop calling here. I'm going to call the police. Julio never threatened, never yelled, just asked, politely, if Lydia was home. Could Rosa tell her he called? Could Rosa tell her he just wanted 5 minutes? Rosa stopped answering after the 14th call. After that, the phone just rang and rang. He arrived at the club at 2:50 a.m. The bouncer at the top of the stairs, a thick-necked guy named Ramon who'd played semi-pro baseball in the DR, let him in because Julio had been there before, because it was easier than arguing. Inside, the temperature hit him first. 80 degrees, maybe more. The heat of 120 bodies pressed together. The music so loud you felt it in your sternum. Julio pushed through to the coat check. Lydia saw him coming. Her face changed. Not anger, not fear, something between the two. Resignation, maybe. The argument lasted 3 minutes. Julio standing too close, Lydia stepping back, trying to keep her voice low because people were watching. Julio's words slurred, rapid-fire Spanish, accusations mixed with pleading. Lydia's responses clipped, final. No, leave, don't do this. Ramon appeared, one hand on Julio's shoulder, firm but not rough. Time to go, man. Julio shrugged him off, tried to grab Lydia's wrist. Ramon stepped between them. Now it wasn't a suggestion. 2 hands on Julio's shoulders, steering him toward the stairs. Julio yelling over his shoulder, people turning to watch. Lydia standing there with her arms crossed, shaking her head. People were staring now. The music still pounded, but conversations had stopped in a 20-foot radius around the coat check. Julio could feel the eyes on him, the judgment. He recognized some of these people, had danced with them, shared drinks, made small talk during slow songs. Now they looked at him like he was pathetic, like he was the problem, not Lydia, who'd promised him things and then changed her mind. Not Lydia, who wouldn't even give him a chance to explain. Him, always him. At 3:05 a.m., Julio was back on the street. Southern Boulevard empty except for a couple of guys smoking outside a bodega 2 blocks down. The air cold on his face after the heat inside. He stood there for maybe 30 seconds staring up at the second-floor windows where light leaked around the blackout curtains. The bass thumping faintly through the walls. Music and laughter and life continuing without him. Like he'd never existed. Like he didn't matter. Then he turned and walked north. The walk was automatic, muscle memory. Left on East Tremont, past the shuttered laundromat with its accordion security gate tagged in blue and silver spray paint. Past the bodega where the owner sat behind bulletproof glass, reading a Spanish-language newspaper, surrounded by lottery tickets and cigarette cartons. Past the burnt-out shell of a building that had caught fire 2 years ago and never been demolished, just left to rot, windows like empty eye sockets. Nobody on the street noticed him. At 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning in the South Bronx, a solitary man walking with his hands in his pockets was unremarkable. 3 blocks away, at the corner of East Tremont and Southern Boulevard, an Amoco gas station stayed open 24 hours. The attendant, a Pakistani immigrant named Rashid, who'd see Julio's face on the news by lunchtime, watched through bulletproof glass as a man approached the window at 3:28 a.m. The man asked for $1 worth of gasoline. Rashid handed him a red plastic container, the kind you use for lawnmowers, and watched him fill it at pump 3. Julio paid with quarters and dimes, counting them out slowly on the metal tray. Didn't make eye contact. Walked away holding the container at his side, gasoline sloshing with each step. The container was cheap plastic, the kind that cracks if you drop it on concrete. The cap screwed on tight, but not perfect. A faint smell of gasoline followed Julio as he walked. He held it in his left hand away from his body, the weight pulling at his shoulder. 1 gallon weighs about 6 pounds. This wasn't quite a gallon, maybe 3/4, but it felt heavier. Or maybe that was just his arm getting tired. He switched hands, kept walking. Southern Boulevard at 3:30 a.m. was a study in contrasts. Most buildings dark, most people sleeping, but here and there, signs of life. A window on the 4th floor where someone watched TV, blue flicker visible through thin curtains. A bodega's neon sign buzzing and crackling. Happy Land's windows, still glowing. Julio could hear the music from half a block away, faint but persistent. A merengue beat, fast and relentless. Inside, people were dancing. Lydia was working. Life was continuing without him. To understand what the fire marshal's report called total combustion failure within 90 seconds, you have to go back further. Back to when Julio and Lydia were just 2 people trying to survive in a city that didn't care if they lived or died. They met in September 1988 at a different club, El Tropical in Washington Heights, long since closed. Julio had worked then, loading trucks at a distribution warehouse in Hunts Point. 6 days a week, 7 a.m. to 4 p.m., $6.50 an hour under the table. Enough to keep his basement room, buy food, have a few dollars for weekends. Lydia was new to the city, staying with a cousin in the Bronx, working hotel housekeeping for $4.75 an hour, plus whatever tips guests left on pillows, usually nothing. They danced that first night, merengue, the fast kind where you barely lift your feet, where the skill is in the hip movement. Julio could dance. That was something. For 3 months, it worked. They saw each other twice a week, Saturday nights, sometimes Wednesday if neither had early shifts. Julio paid for dinners at cheap Dominican spots on Broadway. Mangú with salami, tostones, malta to drink. They walked along the Hudson when weather allowed, talking about nothing important. Family back home, frustrations with jobs, dreams of someday owning something, anything. Lydia mentioned night school for nursing. Julio talked about starting a car service with a friend, except the friend was hypothetical, and Julio didn't have a driver's license. They slept together at Lydia's place because Julio's basement had a shared bathroom at the top of the stairs and no real privacy. Lydia's apartment was barely bigger than Julio's room, but it felt different. She'd made it hers. A poster of Tegucigalpa on one wall, a small radio that picked up Spanish-language stations, a hot pink shower curtain she'd bought at a 99-cent store. She kept the place clean in a way Julio never managed with his own space. Dishes washed immediately, bed made every morning even though she'd just unmake it again at night. She had routines. Coffee at 6 a.m., always in the same chipped mug. Breakfast was a piece of toast with margarine, sometimes an orange if they were on sale. She walked to the subway at 6:45, rode the 2 train to Times Square, walked 4 blocks to the hotel where she'd worked since arriving in New York. The hotel was a mid-range place on 46th Street, the kind that catered to tourists and business travelers who couldn't afford the Marriott. Lydia worked housekeeping, second shift, noon to 8 p.m. 13 rooms a day, sometimes 15 if they were short-staffed. She'd learned to make a bed with hospital corners in under 2 minutes, to spot a bedbug infestation from across the room, to ignore the things guests left behind, empty liquor bottles, used condoms, sometimes worse. The work destroyed her back. By age 29, she already woke up stiff every morning, needed 10 minutes of stretching before she could walk normally. But the job was legal, the pay was regular, and nobody asked too many questions about her immigration status. By January 1989, things had shifted. Julio lost the warehouse job. The operation got raided by INS, and even though Julio had papers from the Mariel boat lift, the owner shut down temporarily and didn't call him back. Unemployment checks helped, $143 every 2 weeks, but it wasn't the same. He had more time now, too much time. Started showing up at Lydia's without calling first, waiting outside her hotel when her shift ended, even when she told him she had errands, calling the payphone in her building's hallway at odd hours, 11 p.m., 6 a.m., and asking her cousin if Lydia was home. Lydia didn't panic immediately. Plenty of men got intense, especially after losing work. Machismo culture, insecurity, whatever you want to call it. She made allowances. But by summer, the intensity had calcified into something uglier. Julio accused her of cheating, no evidence, just accusations. Got angry when she went out with girlfriends. Showed up drunk at Happyland twice in August, making scenes, forcing Ramon to escort him out. Lydia's friends told her what she already knew. This isn't going to get better. The accusations escalated in specificity. Julio convinced himself Lydia was sleeping with Ramon, the bouncer. No basis for this. Ramon was married with 3 kids, never showed any interest in Lydia beyond professional courtesy. But in Julio's mind, the math worked. Ramon was big, confident, employed. Everything Julio wasn't. When Lydia denied it, Julio demanded to see her work schedule, her pay stubs, wanted to know where she was every minute she wasn't with him. Started showing up at the hotel not to wait for her, but to watch her work, standing in the lobby until security asked him to leave. She ended it on March 4th, 1990. Sunday afternoon, Lydia's day off. She met Julio at a McDonald's on 149th Street, public place, neutral ground. Told him calmly, clearly. It was over. She cared about him but couldn't do this anymore. He needed to move on. Julio cried. Not quiet tears, full sobbing, right there in the booth, people staring. He begged, promised to change, promised to get help, find work, stop drinking, whatever she wanted. Lydia held firm. When she stood to leave, Julio grabbed her hand. She pulled away, walked out, caught the bus back to her apartment and triple-locked the door. The McDonald's was half empty, just a few families and teenagers. A kid's birthday party in the corner, balloons tied to chairs, a cake from the supermarket. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the smell of French fries and industrial cleaner. Lydia walked past all of it, pushed through the glass doors, stood at the bus stop shaking. Not from fear exactly, from the finality of it, from knowing she'd just hurt someone badly and there was no taking it back. The bus took 20 minutes to arrive. She sat in the back staring out the window at the city passing by, bodegas and churches and nail salons and vacant lots, the endless gray sprawl of the Bronx in winter. For 3 weeks, Julio didn't accept it. Called the payphone, left messages with her cousin. Tell Lydia I love her. Tell Lydia I'm sorry. Tell Lydia I just want to talk. Showed up outside the hotel twice. Both times security escorted him off the property before Lydia even saw him. On March 22nd, 3 days before the fire, he wrote a letter. 5 pages, handwritten on notebook paper. Rambling, repetitive, oscillating between love confessions and vague threats. You're making a mistake. I would do anything for you. You're going to regret this. Please just talk to me. He mailed it to the hotel because he didn't have Lydia's home address. Lydia read the first page, threw the rest in the trash. Lydia got ready for her shift in the narrow bathroom she shared with her cousin Rosa and Rosa's 2 kids. The mirror above the sink had a crack running diagonally from corner to corner, and the fluorescent bulb flickered when the building's ancient wiring struggled under the weight of everyone's Saturday evening routines. Hair dryers, radios, someone's kid watching cartoons on a tiny TV in the next apartment. She pulled her hair back with an elastic band, tight enough to last through 6 hours of heat and bodies. Applied lipstick, Revlon, shade called Love That Red, bought on clearance at Duane Reade. Not because she cared about looking good for the coat check, because putting on lipstick made her feel like she had her shit together, even when she didn't. The lipstick was old, bought 6 months ago, the kind that gets waxy at the bottom when you've used it too much. She had to warm it against her wrist before it would apply evenly. The color was too bright, too bold for her usual taste, but it had been on sale for $1.99, and she couldn't resist. She wore it every Saturday night, reapplied it twice during her shift when the heat and humidity made it smudge. It became her ritual. 8:30 p.m., stand in front of the cracked mirror, put on the red lipstick, become the version of herself who could handle 6 hours of drunk people and loud music and Julio's phone calls that wouldn't stop. Rosa knocked on the bathroom door. You working late tonight? Same as always. 4 o'clock probably. Julio been bothering you? Lydia paused, lipstick halfway to her mouth. Not this week. Good. That pendejo needs to move on. Lydia smiled at her reflection. Thin, tired, but still hers. Yeah, he does. She finished getting ready. Black jeans, white sneakers, a sweater Rosa had lent her because the coat check corner got drafty near the windows. The sweater was gray wool, too big in the shoulders, with a small moth hole near the hem that Lydia had repaired with black thread. You couldn't see the repair unless you knew it was there. She grabbed her purse. Inside, Tylenol, chapstick, a roll of numbered tickets for coats, $20 in tips from last weekend, the letter from Julio she'd stopped reading. She thought about throwing the letter away before leaving, but didn't. Just shoved it deeper into the purse's side pocket and headed for the door. "Be safe," Rosa called from the couch, where she sat folding laundry with the TV on low volume. "Always am." The walk to Happy Land took 18 minutes. Southern Boulevard at 9 p.m., still active, still loud. Bodegas open, music spilling from apartments, groups of teenagers on stoops smoking and laughing. Lydia walked fast, head down, hands in pockets. She knew these streets, which blocks to avoid after dark, which corners had cops posted, where the dealers congregated. The dealers worked the corner of 174th and Prospect. 3 guys in North Face jackets who called out to passing cars. Lydia walked past them every night, had for 3 years, and they'd stopped noticing her. She was furniture, part of the scenery, not worth the effort. She passed the Amico station at East Tremont without noticing it. The fluorescent lights made the intersection bright as day, illuminating the intersection in harsh white light. A cab idled at the pump, driver inside drinking coffee from a deli cup. Rashid, the attendant, stood behind bulletproof glass, watching the street. Lydia walked past. 3 blocks later, she climbed the wooden stairs to Happy Land, said hello to Ramon at the top, dropped her purse in the coat check corner, and started her shift. By 10:30 p.m., the club was half full. By midnight, standing room only. The crowd was usual Saturday mix. Families celebrating birthdays, young couples on dates, groups of friends blowing off steam after long work weeks. Lydia knew most of them by sight, many by name. She checked coats, made small talk, kept track of who'd had too much to drink and might need a cab. At 1:15 a.m., she helped a woman find her jacket after someone else had accidentally taken it. At 2:10 a.m., she broke up a minor argument between 2 guys who both claimed ticket number 47. At 2:50 a.m., Julio walked through the door. At 3:05 a.m., Ramon threw him out. At 3:39 a.m., Lydia would still be alive. After Ramon ejected him at 3:05 a.m., Julio stood on Southern Boulevard for 38 seconds. Long enough for the cold air to cut through his drunkenness, not long enough for clarity. His thoughts were simple. Lydia humiliated him. Lydia chose that place over him. Lydia wouldn't listen. He walked north, hands in jacket pockets, head down. The jacket was denim, thin, bought at a thrift store in 1987 and worn nearly every day since. The lining was torn in places, stuffing leaking out near the collar. One of the buttons was missing, replaced with a safety pin. Julio had meant to sew on a real button for 3 years, but never got around to it. Now, walking through 47-degree air at 3 a.m., he could feel the cold seeping through the torn lining. Past the bodega where 2 guys were smoking outside, they glanced at him, didn't speak. One of them was someone Julio recognized vaguely. Might have worked at the warehouse years ago. Might have just had one of those faces. Turned left on East Tremont. The streets were empty now, just scattered trash blowing in the wind, and the distant hum of an overnight bus heading toward the bridge. He wasn't thinking yet, not really, just moving. At 3:15 a.m., he stopped outside a closed laundromat, its interior lights off, security gate locked. His reflection in the dark window. Thin face, unshaven, eyes bloodshot. A week's worth of stubble, maybe more. Hair unwashed, uncombed, sticking up at odd angles. The denim jacket hanging loose on a frame that had lost 15 pounds since losing the warehouse job. He stood there long enough that a passing car slowed down. Driver checking if he needed help or was a threat. Julio didn't notice. He was thinking about the stairwell. The only way in. The only way out. The laundromat's interior was visible through the glass. Rows of washers and dryers. A change machine. Plastic chairs bolted to the floor. A sign in English and Spanish listed prices. $1.75 wash, $1.25 dry. Someone had taped a lost cat poster to the window. Orange tabby, answers to mango, reward offered. The poster was dated February 12th, over a month old. The cat was probably dead. Everything dies eventually. By 3:20 a.m., the idea had solidified. Not fully formed, he wasn't planning exactly, just following a logic that made sense only in his alcohol-soaked brain. Fire. The stairs. Trap them. Make them feel what he felt. Make Lydia understand. He walked to the Amico station at 3:28 a.m. Rashid, the attendant, saw him coming through the bulletproof glass. Late-night customers weren't unusual, cabs needing gas, truck drivers, the occasional drunk who needed cigarettes. Julio approached the window, pulled out a handful of change from his pocket, quarters, dimes, nickels, a few pennies. He counted it twice to make sure he had enough. Asked for $1 of gasoline. Rashid handed him a red plastic container through the pass-through slot. Watched him walk to pump 3, fill it. The smell, sharp, chemical, unmistakable, would stay in Rashid's memory forever. Julio screwed the cap on tight, carried the container in his left hand, walked away. Rashid made a note in the log. $1 gas, pump 3, 3:31 a.m. No name, no ID. Just another transaction in a long night of transactions. By noon, he'd be talking to detectives, trying to remember details, realizing he'd sold the gasoline that ended 87 lives. Julio walked back towards Southern Boulevard. The container weighed maybe 3 pounds, gasoline sloshing against the sides with each step. He held it close to his body, not hiding it, but not advertising it either. Nobody stopped him, nobody saw. The streets were that empty. At 3:35 a.m., he reached the corner of East Tremont and Southern. The club was still going, bass thumping faintly through the walls, windows glowing around the blackout curtains. He stood across the street, under a broken streetlight that had been broken for months, maybe years. The city never fixed anything in this neighborhood. Stared up at those glowing windows. For 90 seconds, Julio hesitated. Not because he was reconsidering, he was past that, but because the mechanics required commitment. He'd have to cross the street, walk to the door, go down the stairs or stay at street level, pour the gasoline, light it, run. All of it in sequence, no room for mistakes. He looked down at the red container, thought about Lydia's face when Ramon had pulled him away, thought about the letter she'd thrown away without reading, thought about 3 weeks of silence, of calling and getting nothing back, thought about standing in that club surrounded by people who looked at him like he was pathetic, like he was the problem, like he was nothing. The doubt wasn't moral, it was practical. Could he do it? Would it work? He unscrewed the cap, tested it. Gasoline fumes hit his nose, made his eyes water. He screwed it back on, looked up at the windows. The music was still going, he could hear it faintly. A woman's voice, singing in Spanish, something about lost love. How appropriate. How fucking appropriate. At 3:38 a.m., he decided, yes. Crossed Southern Boulevard, the street empty except for a stray dog rooting through garbage 2 blocks south, tail between its legs, ribs showing through mangy fur. Reached the entrance to 1959 Southern Boulevard. The wooden stairs descending from street level to the first door. He didn't go down, stayed at the top, unscrewed the container's cap, and poured. The gasoline spread fast, soaking into the old wood, filling the stairwell with fumes. He emptied the entire container, shaking out the last drops. The smell was overwhelming now, chemical and wrong. He tossed the empty container aside, reached into his pocket for matches, found them. A book of matches from some bodega, maybe 10 left. His hands shook. Took him 3 tries to tear one match free. Lydia's younger sister, Anna, had come to the club that night. 22, worked at a factory in Long Island City, lived with their mother in Tegucigalpa, but was visiting for 2 weeks. The factory made plastic components for electronics, repetitive work, minimum wage, but legal and steady. Anna sent money home too, not as much as Lydia, but what she could. She'd wanted to see where Lydia worked, experience New York nightlife, dance to music from home, see what her sister's American dream actually looked like. They'd been standing near the coat check corner, talking between songs. Anna had arrived at midnight, taken the train from Queens, paid her $5 at the door. She was wearing a dress Lydia had helped her pick out at a discount store on Fordham Road. Red and white floral pattern, too thin for March, but perfect for dancing. She'd danced with half a dozen guys already, turned down twice as many. Now she was taking a break, drinking a Coke that cost $2, catching up with her sister. "Do you ever regret leaving?" Anna asked. Lydia looked at her sister, young face, hopeful eyes, no idea what it costs to survive here. Every day, Lydia said, but I can't go back with nothing. Mama needs the money. You all need the money. You don't need to carry everything. Somebody has to. Anna hugged her. Quick, tight, the kind of hug you give when you know you won't see someone for a while. I'm proud of you, Anna said. Lydia smiled. You're drunk. That too, they laughed. The DJ put on Amorcito Corazon, a classic, the kind that gets the older couples on the floor. Anna watched them dance, men in their 50s and 60s, women in dresses they'd brought from home, moving with muscle memory from decades of practice. Old couples who'd survived everything, migration, poverty, discrimination, and all of it together. She wanted that someday, wanted to be 60 and still dancing with someone who knew all her steps. Lydia watched them too, thinking similar thoughts, wondering if she'd ever have that. Julio had been her best shot at a relationship, and look how that turned out. Maybe she wasn't meant for that kind of happiness. Maybe her purpose was work and sacrifice and sending money home. Maybe that was enough. At 3:37 a.m., Anna pulled Lydia toward the floor. One dance, come on. Lydia shook her head. I'm working. One dance. Ramon won't care. But before they could move, Lydia caught a whiff of something, faint, chemical. She wrinkled her nose. You smell that? Anna shrugged. Smells like a gas station. Someone probably spilled something. At 3:39 a.m., Lydia stepped toward the door to check if someone had spilled something near the entrance. The smell is getting stronger, seeping up through the floorboards. She never reached the door. The air outside was cold, and she'd left her sweater at the coat check. She turned back, thought better of it. Anna was already dancing with someone else, a guy in a Cowboys jersey who looked about 19. Lydia smiled, headed back to her corner. At 3:40 a.m., she was 5 feet from the coat check table when the lights flickered once. The building's bad wiring, something that happened every weekend. Nobody thought anything of it. At 3:41 a.m. and 16 seconds, Julio struck the match. The flame caught instantly. Gasoline doesn't hesitate. He dropped the match, watched the fire crawl down the stairs like liquid light, orange and yellow and impossibly bright in the darkness. The heat hit his face immediately, made him step back. The fire moved faster than he expected, consuming the wooden stairs in seconds, climbing the walls, filling the narrow space with flames and black smoke. He turned away, walked, didn't run, walked across Southern Boulevard, stood under the broken streetlight, lit a cigarette with hands that barely shook, watched. Inside Happy Land, the first sign was sound, a low whoosh, like a furnace kicking on. Then smoke, black, thick, moving faster than thought. The music still played, Amorcito Corazon, filling the room, accordion and percussion, and a woman's voice singing about heartbreak. Then someone screamed, a single voice, high and terrified. Then everyone screamed. Then the door to the stairs, the only exit, became a wall of fire no one could pass. The fire moved with purpose. Gasoline doesn't burn. It explodes into vapor and ignites everything it touches. The wooden stairs, untreated and soaked in decades of spilled beer and grease, caught in 3 seconds. The walls, painted with cheap latex over old wallpaper, peeled and blackened. The narrow stairwell became a chimney, funneling heat and smoke upward toward the second floor, where 161 people were dancing, drinking, laughing, living the last moments of their lives without knowing it. At 3:41 a.m. and 32 seconds, the fire reached the door at the top of the stairs. The door opened inward, pulled toward you to leave, pushed to enter. In a building code written by people who understood egress, this was backwards. In Happy Land, nobody had thought about it. The door was closed. Smoke seeped through the gap at the bottom first, thin gray wisps that went unnoticed in the dim red lighting and cigarette haze. Then more. Then the smell. Miguel Santos, 34, was closest to the door. Accountant by day, worked for a small firm in Manhattan doing taxes for other immigrants. He'd been leaning against the wall near the entrance, drinking a Presidente, waiting for his wife Carmen to finish dancing. Carmen loved to dance, could go for hours. Miguel didn't have the stamina anymore. not at 34 with a bad knee from a construction accident years ago. So he leaned against the wall, nursed his beer, watched her move across the floor with her friends. She looked happy. That was enough. He smelled it first, not smoke exactly, but something chemical and wrong. He turned toward the door, frowned, took a step closer, reached for the handle. The metal was already hot. He yanked his hand back, confused, tried again, gripping his shirt sleeve over his palm. Pulled the door open 6 inches. The world on the other side was fire, orange and roaring and so hot his eyebrows singed instantly. He slammed the door shut, stumbled backwards, yelled something nobody heard over the music. The DJ, headphones on, didn't notice. The bass pounded, Llorarás by Oscar de Leon. People kept dancing. Miguel yelled louder, grabbed the person nearest to him. Carlos Ramirez, 19, high school senior, college acceptance letter in his pocket. Carlos had been accepted to CUNY Lehman, planned to study computer science, wanted to be the first in his family to finish college. The letter had arrived that week. He'd shown everyone, carried it everywhere. It was in his jacket pocket right now, folded carefully in the envelope. Fire! Miguel's voice cracked. Carlos looked confused, then saw Miguel's face, the panic, the burnt hand, turned toward the door. Smoke was pouring through now, not wisps, but a dark column, spreading across the ceiling. Someone else noticed, then 3 people, then 10. The DJ cut the music at 3:42 a.m. Not because he understood what was happening, because someone yanked the plug in a panic. The sudden silence was worse than noise. For one frozen second, 161 people stood still, staring at the smoke billowing from the door, trying to process what was happening. Then the screaming started. The stampede toward the door lasted 4 seconds before the truth became clear. There was no way out. Miguel tried to open the door again, managed to pull it 2 inches before heat and smoke forced him back. 3 men rushed forward to help, grabbed the handle together, heaved. They got the door halfway open. The stairwell beyond was an inferno. Flames climbing the walls, heat so intense it melted the linoleum on the landing, warped the metal handrail. One of the men, Eduardo Ramirez, 47, Carlos's father, construction foreman, took a breath to shout instructions and inhaled superheated air. His lungs seared. He collapsed instantly, blocking the doorway. 2 others tried to pull him back. The door swung shut. Fire licked through the gap. Nobody could get past. Eduardo had been in New York since 1979, 11 years. Worked construction the entire time, mostly residential. Queens, Brooklyn, the occasional job in Manhattan if the money was good. He'd built scaffolding, poured concrete, installed drywall. Hard work that paid decently. $18 an hour when the market was good, $12 when it wasn't. He'd brought Carlos over from Honduras in 1985, when Carlos was 14. Wanted to give his son opportunities he'd never had. Worked double shifts for years to afford it. Tonight had been a celebration. Carlos's college acceptance, the boy's future finally secured. Eduardo had been so proud, he'd bought a round of drinks for everyone near the bar. Now he was dying on the floor, his son 10 feet away, unable to reach him. Smoke filled the room with horrifying speed. The club's layout worked against them. One long rectangular space, low ceiling, no ventilation. The smoke moved in a black wave across the ceiling, then dropped in sheets. Visibility went from dim to 0 in 23 seconds. The temperature climbed, 90 degrees, 100, 120. The Christmas lights melted and dripped molten plastic onto the floor. The blackout curtains on the windows ignited, adding more smoke, more heat. People closest to the door collapsed first, not from fire, but from smoke inhalation. Carbon monoxide, superheated air destroying lungs faster than the brain could register pain. At 3:42 a.m. and 58 seconds, someone called 911 from the payphone near the back of the club. The call went through. A woman's voice, screaming in Spanish, "We're trapped, there's fire, we can't get out!" The line went dead. Either the phone melted, or she collapsed, or the connection failed. Dispatch logged the call. Fire with people trapped, 1959 Southern Boulevard, second floor social club. Units were dispatched at 3:43 a.m. and 12 seconds. Engine 46, ladder 27, battalion 15. Estimated arrival time, 6 minutes. Others stampeded toward the windows. The windows were small, 2 feet by 3 feet, covered with metal security bars screwed into brick. 5/8-inch steel, installed years ago to prevent break-ins. Now they prevented escape. Rafael Ortega, 28, carpenter, grabbed a chair and smashed it against the glass. The window shattered. The bars didn't budge. Fresh air rushed in, feeding the fire instead of helping. Flames roared higher. The heat intensified. People pressed against the bars, hands reaching through, screaming into the night where nobody heard them. Rafael had built those kinds of bars before, knew exactly how they were installed. 4 screws per bar, sunk into brick and concrete. You'd need a power drill to remove them. 20 minutes minimum, even with the right tools. He grabbed the bars anyway, pulled with everything he had. The metal didn't move. Other hands joined his, 5 people, 10 people, all pulling together. The bars flexed, maybe a millimeter, that was all. Behind them, smoke was filling the room, dropping lower every second. Maria Santos, 23, dental hygienist student, single mother of 2, was near the center of the room when the smoke descended. Her children, Gabriela, 4, and Miguel Jr., 2, were with their grandmother tonight, safe in an apartment on 163rd Street. Maria had been reluctant to go out, hadn't been to Happy Land in 6 months, but her friend Rosa had convinced her. "You need a break. You work too hard. Come dance." So she'd come, had been dancing with Rosa when the music stopped. She'd been dancing to Amorcito Corazon, eyes closed, letting the music carry her away from hospital bills and daycare costs and the grind of working full-time while taking night classes. For 3 minutes, she'd felt young again, felt like the person she'd been before motherhood and responsibility. Then the screaming started. She opened her eyes to chaos. Maria fell, trampled by people who couldn't see her in the darkness, who were running blind toward exits that didn't exist. She hit the floor hard, felt ribs crack, tried to get up. Someone's foot came down on her hand, crushing fingers. She screamed. Nobody heard. The smoke was everywhere now, thick and black and caustic. It filled her lungs. She coughed, couldn't stop coughing, each cough sending pain through her broken ribs. Thought about her children. Thought about Gabriela starting kindergarten in September. Thought about Miguel Jr.'s birthday in 2 weeks. She tried to crawl, made it 3 feet before her arms gave out, collapsed face down on the floor. Smoke inhalation takes between 1 and 3 minutes. Maria was unconscious within 90 seconds. Rosa Martinez, 34, was 2 feet away, trying to find Maria in the darkness. Rosa taught 3rd grade at PS 55 on Southern Boulevard, had taught there for 6 years. She knew half the kids in the neighborhood, had taught their older siblings, knew their families. She was the kind of teacher who spent her own money on classroom supplies, who stayed late to tutor struggling students, who showed up to her students' birthday parties and quinceañeras. Tonight was supposed to be her night off, her one break from responsibilities. She'd left her 3 children with her sister Sofia, had promised to be home by 4 a.m. She dropped to her hands and knees, where the air was still breathable, tried to find Maria by touch. Her hands found bodies. She didn't know whose, couldn't see. The smoke was a physical presence, thick as cotton, filling her nose and throat. She called out Maria's name. No answer. Kept crawling. Her hand brushed someone's hair, someone's shoulder. She grabbed, pulled. The person didn't move. Dead weight. Rosa's lungs were burning, each breath a knife. She needed air, needed to get out. But she couldn't leave Maria. Couldn't. She kept searching, kept pulling at bodies in the darkness, until her own body quit at 3:44 a.m. and 23 seconds. She collapsed 5 feet from Maria's body. Neither woman burned. They suffocated, surrounded by people who were also suffocating, all of them inches apart, all of them dying in the dark. Sofia Martinez, 31, Rosa's younger sister, was at the bar when it happened. She'd gone to get water, was standing with her back to the room when she heard the first scream. Turned, saw the wave of people rushing toward the exit. Her training kicked in. Sofia was a nurse, emergency room, Bronx Lebanon Hospital. She'd seen mass casualties before, stabbings, overdoses, car accidents. This was different. No ambulances. No help coming fast enough. Just smoke and fire and bodies. She tried to reach Rosa, pushed against the tide of people running away from the door, made it maybe 10 feet before the crowd became impassable, a solid wall of panicked humanity. Someone's elbow hit her face, split her lip. Someone else knocked her off balance. She got pushed against the wall, pinned by 3 people who'd collapsed in front of her. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The smoke was dropping fast, a black curtain descending from the ceiling. She thought about her fiancé, Luis Hernandez, 34, taxi driver, worked nights. He'd proposed 3 weeks ago with a ring he'd saved for a year to buy. Quarter-carat diamond, white gold band, $450 from a jeweler on Fordham Road. She was wearing it right now, on her left hand. They'd set a date, June 15th, 1990. 3 months away. She'd already bought her dress, white lace, off the rack from a bridal shop in Yonkers, on sale for $200. It was hanging in her closet at home, plastic covering still on. She thought about Luis waking up tomorrow morning, calling her phone, getting no answer. She thought about that white dress. She stopped thinking at 3:44 a.m. and 12 seconds. Smoke inhalation, carbon monoxide poisoning, hyperthermia. The medical examiner would list all 3 as contributing factors. Cause of death, fire-related asphyxiation. 27 people died at the door. Not from burns, from compression, from smoke, from the biology of panic. They'd piled up against the door and the walls, a pyramid of bodies, 3 and 4 deep, each person trying to escape, each person making escape impossible for those beneath them. The door itself became impassable. Eduardo Ramirez's body still wedged against it, other bodies piled on top. The handle turned, but the door wouldn't open more than 6 inches. Fresh air leaked through the gap, just enough to keep the fire burning, not enough to let anyone through. Carlos Ramirez, 19, Eduardo's son, had been separated from his father in the initial rush. Carlos was small, 5 feet 7 inches, 140 pounds, and got shoved toward the back of the club by the stampede. He watched his father go down near the door, tried to fight his way forward, couldn't. The smoke was too thick. He dropped to the floor where the air was clearer, crawled on his stomach toward where he'd last seen his father. His hand touched someone's shoe, someone's arm, someone's face, bodies stacked like cordwood. He called out, no answer, kept crawling. His lungs burned. His eyes streamed tears, not from emotion, but from smoke exposure. The college acceptance letter in his jacket pocket was getting crumpled against the floor as he crawled. At 3:45 a.m., he stopped crawling. Not because he gave up, because his body quit. Respiratory failure. He was 10 feet from his father. Neither one knew how close they were. 3 people escaped. Only 3. Through a transom window above the main entrance, a small rectangular opening 12 inches by 30 inches, that nobody had noticed because it was obscured by the DJ booth. 2 men, Valentin Salas, 21, and Jesus Robles, 25, found it by accident when they climbed on top of the DJ booth trying to escape the smoke. Valentin worked at a print shop in Mott Haven, operated industrial printers, made $7.50 an hour. He'd been at the club with his girlfriend, Teresa, celebrating her birthday. 23rd birthday, first time they'd been out in months because money was tight. Teresa was still down there somewhere, in the smoke. He'd lost her in the stampede, had screamed her name until his voice gave out. Now he was climbing, trying to find higher ground, trying to find air. The transom didn't have bars, it had a latch. Valentin smashed the glass with his elbow, cut his arm to the bone, didn't notice. Squeezed through. The opening was tiny, barely wider than his shoulders. He had to twist sideways, exhale completely to fit. Fell 10 feet to the street below. Landed on his shoulder, heard something pop, dislocated it. Got up anyway. Turned back toward the building, screaming for others to follow. Screaming for Teresa specifically, hoping she could hear him, hoping she'd find the window. Jesus came through next. Narrower frame, less trouble. Delivery driver for a furniture store, had been at the club alone, just wanted to dance, clear his head after a shit week. Fell from the window, landed on his feet but twisted his ankle. Didn't care. Stood next to Valentin, both of them screaming up at the transom window, begging others to follow. Then Luz Peña, 28, one of the bartenders. Guatemalan immigrant, been in New York 3 years, worked 2 jobs, Happy Land on weekends, school cafeteria during the week. She saw Jesus disappear through the window, climbed up after him. She had to strip her jacket off to fit through, tore her shirt, didn't care, squeezed through, scraped her back raw on the window frame, dropped, landed hard, fractured her ankle. Felt the bone snap, felt pain shoot up her leg. Crawled away from the building anyway, adrenaline overriding everything. Looked back at the window. Nobody else came through. She waited, screamed up at the transom. Nobody came. At 3:48 a.m., she stopped screaming and started sobbing. The rest stayed inside. Not because they didn't try, because trying didn't matter. The windows with bars killed hope. The door was impassable. The smoke was everywhere. Visibility? 0. Temperature? 160 degrees Fahrenheit, enough to cause third-degree burns from air alone. People collapsed in clusters. Families, friends, strangers who'd grabbed each other in the chaos. Some prayed, the Lord's Prayer in Spanish, voices getting weaker. Some screamed until their voices gave out, until they couldn't draw breath to scream anymore. Some simply laid down and waited. The fire never reached most of them. They died from smoke, from heat, from the simple fact that air stopped being breathable. Death came faster for some than others. Children went first, smaller lungs, less tolerance. Nobody under 18 was present that night, but the young adults went next. Bodies still developing, not yet fully equipped to handle extreme respiratory stress. Elderly people followed. Anyone over 50 with any kind of underlying condition. Young, healthy adults lasted longest, sometimes an extra 30 or 40 seconds. Long enough to understand fully what was happening. Long enough to know they were going to die. The last person to die probably died at 3:47 a.m., maybe 3:48. The medical examiner couldn't be precise. Bodies had been stacked, moved, exposed to different temperatures. Time of death? Between 3:41 a.m. and 3:50 a.m. All of them within 9 minutes, most within 5. On Southern Boulevard, life continued. A gypsy cab cruised past looking for late-night fares. The driver was listening to sports radio, some call-in show discussing the Knicks. Didn't notice the smoke, didn't hear screaming, just drove past, turned left on 178th Street, disappeared. The bodega 2 blocks down was still open, fluorescent lights buzzing, the owner restocking shelves for Sunday morning. Cigarettes, lottery tickets, canned goods. Normal inventory for a normal Sunday. Someone's TV played in an apartment across the street. Late-night infomercial, volume too loud, selling kitchen knives or vacuum cleaners or exercise equipment. A dog barked. The wind carried the smell of smoke, but smoke wasn't unusual in the Bronx. Garbage fires, cooking fires, someone burning trash in a barrel. Nobody looked up. Nobody noticed. Julio stood under the broken streetlight, smoking his cigarette, watching the second-floor windows. The glass glowed orange from inside, like the building had swallowed the sun. The blackout curtains were burning, curling and blackening against the windows. He could hear screaming, faint and muffled, like it was coming from very far away or from underwater. Multiple voices blending into a single sound, rising and falling, then fading. He finished his cigarette, dropped it, stepped on it with the toe of his boot, ground it into the concrete, lit another. His hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped. At 3:47 a.m., a shape pressed against one of the windows. Someone's body crushed against the glass and security bars, trying to force their way through. The glass cracked, but didn't break. The bars didn't move. The shape pressed for maybe 5 seconds, then slid down out of view. Julio watched, smoked, felt nothing, or told himself he felt nothing, or felt something so enormous he couldn't name it, and so called it nothing. At 3:49 a.m., he heard sirens. Still didn't leave, just stood there, smoking, watching the windows until the fire trucks arrived. The first FDNY unit arrived at 3:49 a.m. Engine 46, responding to a 911 call of fire with people trapped. Captain Thomas O'Neill saw the smoke from 2 blocks away, black column rising into the night sky, visible even in the dark. Radioed for backup before the truck even stopped. His crew jumped out, pulling hoses, heading for the building. O'Neill ran toward the entrance, saw the stairs engulfed, turned to his lieutenant. "We need the ladder company. We're going through the windows." Across the street, standing perfectly still under a broken streetlight, a man in a dark jacket watched them work. Officer Raymond Murphy. NYPD patrol was first cop on scene. He saw the same man. Something about the posture was wrong. Too calm, too focused. Murphy walked over. "You see what happened?" Julio turned, looked at Murphy, didn't run, didn't lie, said, "I did it." Murphy blinked. "What?" "I started the fire. I did it." Murphy radioed for backup, handcuffed Julio without resistance. Julio didn't speak again, didn't ask for a lawyer, didn't ask what would happen next. Just stood there with his hands cuffed behind his back, still watching the building. When another officer arrived and put Julio in the back of a squad car, Julio's last view before they drove away was of firefighters cutting through the window bars with power saws, sparks flying into the night. The fire was out by 3:58 a.m. Didn't take long. The building was brick, the fire contained to the stairwell and second floor, nothing structural to feed it once the wood and textiles burned through. What took time was getting inside. Firefighters had to cut through the window bars with power saws, the kind that cut metal, loud and showering sparks. Each window took 3 to 4 minutes. There were 5 windows. By 4:10 a.m., they had access. The first responder through the window, firefighter Patrick Kelly, 11 years on the job, had seen bad fires before. Later said the silence was worse than screams would have been. He swept his flashlight across the interior. Bodies everywhere, stacked at the door, piled at the windows, collapsed in the center of the room, some clutching each other, some alone, all still. He backed out of the window, keyed his radio. Voice steady, professional, trained for moments like this. "We're going to need buses, a lot of buses." Buses meant ambulances, meant body bags, meant this wasn't a rescue anymore. They brought the bodies out one by one. Firefighters formed a chain, passing each victim down through the window to the street, where EMTs confirmed what everyone already knew. Deceased. DOA. Dead on arrival, except they'd never arrived anywhere, just died where they danced. The count climbed. 10 bodies on the street, 20, 30. By 4:30 a.m., the Bronx medical examiner arrived, set up a temporary morgue right there on Southern Boulevard. White tent, industrial lighting, 40 bodies, 50. News cameras appeared, local affiliates first, then network crews as word spread. 60, 70. The family started arriving. Someone had called someone who'd called someone, and now people were running up Southern Boulevard in nightgowns and hastily thrown on jackets, screaming names. "¿Dónde está María? ¿Has visto a mi hijo?" Police set up barricades, yellow tape across the street. 80, 85. At 6:17 a.m., they brought out the last body, victim number 87. A woman, identity unknown at the scene, later identified as Carmen Medina, 41, mother of 3. She'd been found near the bathroom, alone, curled on her side like she was sleeping. By 7 a.m., Southern Boulevard looked like a war zone. Emergency vehicles blocking both lanes. Bodies and bags lined up on the sidewalk, waiting for transport to the morgue. Families behind barricades, some screaming, some silent, all shattered. A woman collapsed, had to be carried away by paramedics. A man punched a police car, left a dent in the hood, bloodied his knuckles. Nobody stopped him. News helicopters circling overhead, cameras recording everything. And in the back of a police car parked 3 blocks away, hands cuffed, face blank, Julio González sat perfectly still. A detective opened the door, slid into the seat next to him, asked him why. Julio looked at him, shrugged, said, "She wouldn't talk to me." The detective wrote it down. Later at the precinct, Julio would elaborate. "I got angry. I don't know what happened. I just did it." 87 people, 90 seconds, 1 match. That was the math. By 8 a.m., the sun was up. March 25th, 1990, dawn came at 6:51 a.m., and by the time morning commuters passed 1959 Southern Boulevard on their way to church or to work, or just to see what had happened, the scene had transformed into something bureaucratic and surreal. Yellow police tape stretched across 3 blocks. Refrigerated morgue trucks idled at the curb, diesel engines rumbling, exhaust visible in the cold morning air. Investigators in white Tyvek suits picked through the building's remains, photographing, measuring, bagging evidence. Everything had to be documented. The stairwell configuration, the door placement, the window bars, the accelerant residue. The smell lingered. Burnt plastic, charred wood, something organic and wrong that would stay in the neighborhood's collective memory for years. People would talk about the smell for months, how it stuck to everything, how you couldn't escape it. The victims' families gathered behind barricades at both ends of the block. Some had been there since 4 a.m. when the first phone calls went out. A bartender from a nearby club had seen the fire, called friends, told them to check on their people. Word spread fast in immigrant communities. By dawn, maybe 50 family members had arrived. By 8 a.m., over 200. They held photos, school pictures, wedding snapshots, passport photos, and showed them to anyone who'd look. Police officers, firefighters, reporters, other families. Have you seen this person? She was wearing a blue dress. He had a scar on his left eyebrow. Right here, you'd see it. She's only 23. She just got here last year. He's my father, please. Have you seen my father? The answers came slowly, cruelly, through a system designed for plane crashes and natural disasters, not for a single nightclub fire that eliminated 87 people in 9 minutes. Detectives and medical examiners tried their best, but identification was difficult. Many victims didn't carry ID. You don't bring your wallet to a dance club. Many had been disfigured by heat and smoke. Some had been trampled, faces unrecognizable. Forensics would require dental records, fingerprints, identifying marks. That took time. Days, in some cases. Families waited. The Bronx Medical Examiner's Office was overwhelmed. They had capacity for maybe 30 bodies at a time, standard procedure for a borough of 1.2 million people. This was 87, plus 3 critically injured survivors being treated at Jacobi Medical Center. The morgue couldn't handle the load. Bodies were transported to temporary facilities, some to the City Medical Examiner in Manhattan, some to hospitals with morgue space, some kept refrigerated in the trucks until permanent arrangements could be made. Families were directed to a temporary processing center set up at the 48th Precinct Station House on East 183rd Street. The process: wait in line, provide a name and description, wait longer while someone checked a master list compiled from driver's licenses, ID cards, and personal effects recovered from the scene. Wallets mostly intact, jewelry, keys, then either relief, not on the list, maybe they got out, or devastation. Deceased, body number 42, preliminary ID pending dental records. The waiting room at the precinct filled beyond capacity. People sat on the floor, leaned against walls, stood in doorways. Some prayed, some cried, some sat in shocked silence. The Honduran consulate sent representatives, provided translators for families who didn't speak English. Catholic Charities set up a crisis counseling station in the precinct parking lot. Volunteers distributed coffee, sandwiches nobody ate. By noon, the line to check the list stretched around the block. Lydia Feliciano Rodriguez wasn't on the deceased list. She'd stepped outside for air at 3:39 a.m., 2 minutes before Julio poured the gasoline. When the fire started, she was half a block away, talking to another coat check worker from a nearby club who'd also stepped out for a smoke break. The coat check worker, a woman named Diana, 26, from El Salvador, had offered Lydia a cigarette. Lydia didn't smoke, but accepted anyway, just to have something to do with her hands. They stood outside talking about nothing important: Diana's boyfriend problems, Lydia's rent increase. Normal conversation, normal night. Then they heard the screams. Lydia turned, saw smoke pouring from the second-floor windows, saw flames visible through the glass. Her first thought was irrational. I left my sweater inside. Her second thought was Anna. Her sister Anna was inside. She ran toward the building. Diana grabbed her arm, tried to hold her back. Lydia pulled free, made it maybe 20 feet before a uniformed cop tackled her to the ground, held her there while she screamed and fought and scratched at his arms. She saw Julio across the street, saw him standing under the streetlight watching. Knew instantly what he'd done. Started screaming his name, not calling for him, but cursing him. Every profanity she knew in Spanish and English. The cop holding her thought she was hysterical, didn't understand. When another officer walked over to the man under the streetlight, and that man said, "I did it." When they handcuffed him and put him in a squad car, Lydia watched from the ground, made eye contact with Julio through the squad car window. He looked at her. No expression, just looked. Then the car drove away. She spent the next 4 hours in the back of an ambulance, medics checking her for shock. They wrapped her in a thermal blanket even though she wasn't cold. Took her blood pressure 3 times. Asked if she needed sedation. She refused. Refused to go to the hospital. Refused to leave the scene. Just sat there in the ambulance with the back doors open, watching firefighters pull bodies from the building, counting them. 1, 2, 3. Trying to see faces, trying to identify Anna. The medics tried to shield her from the view, but she pushed past them. 20, 30, 40. They brought Anna out at 5:37 a.m. Body number 67. Lydia recognized the dress, red and white floral, too thin for March. Started screaming again. Had to be sedated after all. Ketamine injection, 50 milligrams. She woke up 6 hours later in a hospital bed with no memory of how she got there. Anna's body was positively identified via dental records 3 days later. The Honduran consulate arranged for the body to be transported back to Tegucigalpa for burial. Cost, $3,200. The family had $800. The rest came from donations, Catholic charities, community fundraisers, strangers who read about the fire and sent checks. Anna was buried on March 31st, 1990, in a cemetery outside Tegucigalpa. Lydia didn't attend, couldn't afford the plane ticket, couldn't face her mother, couldn't function. She stayed in New York, stayed in bed, stopped going to work. Lost the hotel job after missing 2 weeks without calling. Lost the Happy Land job because Happy Land didn't exist anymore. By April 15th, she'd lost her apartment too. Couldn't make rent, got evicted. Moved in with her cousin Rosa, slept on the couch, barely spoke. 3 blocks north, the bodega that had stayed open all night finally closed. The owner locked the security gate, flipped the sign to closed, went home to sleep. He lived above the store, heard the sirens but didn't investigate. Figured it was the usual Bronx chaos. Ambulance, police response, nothing unusual. Found out what happened when his wife woke him at noon, crying, showing him the TV news. He knew some of the victims. Sold them cigarettes, lottery tickets, milk. Regular customers, people with names. On the Grand Concourse, buses ran their regular Sunday routes. Families dressed for church walked to morning mass at St. Joseph's on Bathgate Avenue. The church was full that morning, standing room only. Father Martinez gave a sermon about tragedy and faith and God's mysterious ways. Half the congregation was crying. Many had family or friends at Happy Land. The collection that day was dedicated to victims' families, raised $4,200, distributed to help with funeral costs and lost income. In Midtown Manhattan, hotel maids started their shifts at the same hotels where Lydia should have been working Monday morning. Her supervisor called her apartment Sunday afternoon, got no answer. Called again Monday, Tuesday, left messages. Lydia, if you don't call back, I have to assume you've quit. By Wednesday, she was replaced. The supervisor saw the news that night, realized Lydia had been at Happy Land. Called the hospital, the police, the consulate. Nobody could tell him if Lydia was alive or dead. He sent flowers to the memorial addressed to Lydia Feliciano and the Happy Land victims. The flowers wilted in the sun. Nobody claimed them. Life continued because life always continues. Indifferent to individual tragedy, indifferent to 87 families whose worlds had just ended while everyone else's kept turning. The stock market opened Monday morning. Trains ran on schedule. Schools held classes. In the Bronx, life went on, but quieter, slower, like the whole borough was holding its breath. At the Happy Land site, investigators found the gas container by 9 a.m. Sunday. Red plastic, Amoco logo, lying in the weeds 10 feet from the building entrance. Still reeking of gasoline despite being empty. They bagged it, tagged it, photographed it from 6 angles. Found accelerant residue on the stairs, took samples, sent them to the lab. Matched them to commercial-grade unleaded gasoline, 87 octane, the cheapest kind. They found Julio's cigarette butts across the street. Marlboro Reds, half-smoked, 4 of them in a small pile. DNA testing wasn't standard in 1990, but they bagged those too. Fingerprints on the gas container. Witness statements from Rashid at the Amoco station. Confession from Julio himself, given freely, without coercion. By noon, they'd built a timeline so precise it could be measured in seconds. 3:05 a.m., Julio ejected from club. 3:28 a.m., purchases gasoline. 3:38 a.m., returns to building. 3:41 a.m., ignites stairwell. 3:42 a.m., first 911 call received. 3:49 a.m., FDNY arrives. 3:58 a.m., fire extinguished. 6:17 a.m., Last body recovered. By 2 p.m., the district attorney's office had filed charges. 87 counts of murder in the second degree, 87 counts of arson in the first degree, multiple counts of reckless endangerment. Julio González, age 36, no prior felony convictions, was held without bail. His arraignment took 6 minutes. He entered no plea. His court-appointed attorney requested a psych evaluation. Denied. The judge cited the premeditated nature of the crime, purchasing gasoline, returning to the scene, waiting to ignite. This wasn't insanity. This was murder. Julio sat in the defendant's chair staring at his hands. They'd given him an orange jumpsuit, white socks, plastic sandals. The handcuffs clinked against the table when he shifted position. When the judge asked if he understood the charges, Julio nodded once. That was the extent of his participation. The media descended like locusts. By Sunday afternoon, every major network had crews on Southern Boulevard. CNN ran continuous coverage, split screen with footage of the building and interviews with survivors. The New York Times sent 4 reporters, local news, Metro Desk, national news, and a features writer who specialized in immigrant communities. The story had everything: immigrants, poverty, illegal nightclub, mass death, arson, rejected love. The coverage was mostly respectful. Interviews with survivors, profiles of victims, questions about building code enforcement. But some outlets led with Julio's mugshot and headlines like "Spurned Lover's Revenge" and "Fatal Attraction Turns Deadly," reducing 87 deaths to a tabloid romance. The Daily News ran a front-page photo of Lydia with the headline, "The Woman Who Lived." Lydia had never given them permission to use her photo. They'd gotten it from her hotel ID badge somehow. She saw it at a newsstand, saw her own face staring back at her, threw up on the sidewalk. Families protested outside the New York Post offices 3 days later, held signs, "87 people, not a love story." Didn't change anything. The papers sold out by noon. Mayor David Dinkins held a press conference at 3 p.m. Sunday. He looked exhausted. He'd been at the scene since 7 a.m., had met with families, promised investigations. He stood at a podium surrounded by city officials, the fire commissioner, the police commissioner, the buildings commissioner, and read from prepared remarks typed on index cards he kept shuffling. This is a tragedy beyond comprehension. Our city grieves for the families of the victims. We will pursue justice. We will examine how this was allowed to happen. We will ensure nothing like this ever happens again. He announced the formation of a task force to inspect all social clubs in the Bronx, promised that building code violations would be prosecuted, promised that illegal establishments would be shut down. He didn't mention that Happy Land had been cited for violations 18 months earlier. November 1988, fire inspector found no sprinklers, inadequate exits, expired permits. Club ordered closed. Owner ignored the order. City never followed up. Nobody wanted to talk about that yet. Reporters shouted questions. Dinkins took 3. How many were undocumented? We're not checking immigration status. These were human beings. Will the club owner face charges? That's under investigation. What do you say to families? Dinkins paused, looked down at his cards, looked back up. I have no words, I'm sorry. His motorcade passed the site on the way back to Gracie Mansion. Dinkins looked out the window at the families still behind barricades. Some had been there for 12 hours. He watched them for the full 3 blocks it took to pass the scene. Later, he'd tell an aide it was the worst day of his time in office. Worse than the riots. Worse than the Crown Heights crisis. Worse than anything he'd experienced. Because this was preventable. Everyone knew it was preventable. The Honduran consulate opened a crisis line for families trying to locate relatives. Within 6 hours, they received 347 calls. Most victims were from Honduras, 57 of the 87, with the majority from small towns near San Pedro Sula and Tegucigalpa. Towns where everyone knew everyone, where whole families had emigrated together, where the community in the Bronx was an extension of community back home. The consulate arranged for emergency travel documents for family members who wanted to bring bodies home for burial. This became complicated. Transporting a body internationally required death certificates, embalming, sealed caskets, customs paperwork, airline cargo arrangements. The cost? Between $2,000 and $4,000 per body. Most families didn't have that kind of money. The average household income for the victims' families was $18,000 a year. Rent alone was $400 to $600 a month. Sending money home to relatives was another $100 to $200 monthly. Nobody had $3,000 saved for emergencies, certainly not for transporting dead bodies across international borders. A relief fund was established by Tuesday, the Happy Land Fire Victim Relief Fund, administered by Catholic Charities. Donations came in: $50 from a church in Queens, $200 from a union local, $10,000 from an anonymous donor. By the end of the week, they'd raised $83,000. Enough to help, not enough to cover everyone. Families had to choose: bring the body home or bury in New York. Most chose home, wanted their loved ones buried in familiar ground, near family, in cemeteries where they could visit. The Honduran government agreed to waive some fees. The airlines, American, Continental, TACA, offered discounted cargo rates. Funeral homes in the Bronx donated services: embalming, caskets at cost, paperwork assistance. By Thursday, the first bodies were on planes back to Central America. Families accompanied them when they could afford tickets. Most couldn't. So their loved ones flew home alone, in cargo holds, while families stayed in the Bronx working jobs they couldn't afford to leave. Others were buried in Bronx cemeteries, Potter's Fields mostly, public plots in places like Woodlawn Cemetery and St. Raymond's. Simple graves, simple stones. Some families pooled money for nicer markers. Some got donations. Maria Santos's grave has a white marble headstone donated by her dental hygiene school, engraved with Maria Santos, 1967 to 1990, loving mother, cherished friend. Her children visit every year on March 25th, leave flowers, tell her about their lives. Gabriela is 39 now. Miguel Jr. is 37. They barely remember her. What they remember is the absence. By nightfall Sunday, 1959 Southern Boulevard was quiet. The bodies had been removed. The investigators had finished their initial sweep. The fire trucks were gone. What remained was a building with broken windows, charred walls, and a stairwell blackened by fire. The smell persisted, acrid, chemical, death. Residents in nearby buildings complained. The city sprayed deodorizer. Didn't help. The smell lasted weeks. The landlord, a man named Alex DiLorenzo, who owns several buildings in the area, released a statement through his lawyer Monday morning. "We are devastated by this tragedy. We are cooperating fully with authorities." He didn't appear in person, didn't visit the site, didn't meet with families. His lawyer read the statement to reporters outside his office in Westchester County, then refused further questions. DiLorenzo had rented the space to Elias Colon in 1983, knowing it would be used as a social club, knowing it didn't meet fire codes. The lease was month to month. Rent was $1,500 cash. No receipts, no paper trail. DiLorenzo collected personally, first of every month. When the fire inspection in 1988 cited violations, DiLorenzo had been notified, did nothing. Rent kept coming in. That was what mattered. He was never charged criminally. The district attorney's office investigated, couldn't prove criminal intent. Civil charges were another matter. Families sued. 17 lawsuits filed by June 1990. DiLorenzo's insurance company settled most for undisclosed amounts, rumored to be between $50,000 and $100,000 per family. The city eventually fined DiLorenzo $15,000 for building code violations. He paid without contest. Sold the building 6 months later for $120,000. Moved to Boca Raton, Florida. Lived there until his death in 2008. Natural causes, age 71. His obituary in the Palm Beach Post made no mention of Happy Land. Elias Colon, the club owner, was arrested Tuesday morning at his apartment in the Bronx, charged with 87 counts of criminally negligent homicide. His defense? He tried to get permits, been denied because of building code issues, stayed open anyway because the community needed a place to gather. The prosecution? He knew the building was unsafe, operated an illegal nightclub for profit, ignored multiple closure orders, prioritized money over safety. The trial lasted 3 weeks in early 1991. Prosecutors presented evidence: the November 1988 fire inspection, the closure order, documentation that Colon had been informed and ignored it. They presented financial records, showing Colon had made approximately $120,000 in profit from the club between 1983 and 1990. They called survivors who testified about the lack of exits, the inadequate safety measures. The defense argued that Cologne was a scapegoat, that the real criminals were the landlord who rented an unsafe space and the arsonist who lit the fire. They pointed out that hundreds of similar clubs operated in the Bronx, that the city knew about them and did nothing. They called character witnesses, community members who testified that Cologne was a good man, that Happy Land had been a safe gathering space for years. The jury deliberated for 2 days, found Cologne not guilty on 84 counts. Guilty on 3 counts, involuntary manslaughter for 3 specific victims whose families had testified they'd personally complained to Cologne about the lack of exits. Maria Santos's mother had told Cologne in January 1990, "This place isn't safe. There's only one door." Cologne had shrugged, said he was working on it. Rosa Martinez had mentioned it to him in February. Carlos Ramirez's father, Eduardo, had complained in early March. All 3 were dead now. The jury found that Cologne's negligence had directly contributed to their deaths. Sentencing: 6 years to be served at Rikers Island. Cologne served 4 years, released early for good behavior in 1995. Deported to the Dominican Republic upon release. His immigration status had been marginal. The conviction made him deportable. Last known address, Santo Domingo, working as a construction supervisor. He gave one interview in 2000 to a Dominican newspaper, said he thought about the fire every day, that he was sorry, that he'd tried his best, never came back to the United States. The survivors, the 3 who escaped through the transom window, became case studies in trauma research. Psychologists, sociologists, medical researchers wanted to understand what set them apart. Why did they survive when 87 others didn't? Luck, mostly. Being in the right place, seeing the right opening, being physically able to fit through a 12 by 30-inch window. Nothing heroic, nothing special, just accidents of positioning and body size. Valentin Salas gave one interview to Telemundo 3 days after the fire, appeared on camera with his arm in a sling, dislocated shoulder still healing. The interviewer asked how he felt. Valentin said, "I should have pulled more people through. I should have done more." The interviewer said it wasn't his fault. Valentin didn't respond, just stared at the camera with dead eyes, refused all media requests after that. His girlfriend, Teresa, the one whose birthday they'd been celebrating, was body number 33, identified via dental records, buried in Honduras, her family's hometown. Valentin paid for the transport, $3,100, nearly his entire savings, attended the funeral, stayed in Honduras for 2 months, considered never returning to New York. But he had a lease, a job, responsibilities. Came back in June, quit the print shop job, moved to New Jersey, Edison, where he didn't know anyone, and nobody knew about the fire. Changed his name legally in 1992. Valentin Salas became Vincent Sanders. Got a job at a warehouse, worked there for 15 years, never married, never had kids, never went to another social club, never danced again. Died in 2009, heart attack, age 40. Obituary listed no survivors. A Columbia University psychologist tracked him as part of a long-term PTSD study from 1990 to 2000. Published findings in a 1998 journal article describing what they called survivor's guilt with persecutory ideation. Valentin believed, irrationally but unshakably, that people blamed him for escaping, for not helping others out, for saving himself while Teresa and everyone else died. He reported nightmares where the families of the dead confronted him, asked him why he didn't pull more people through the window, called him a coward. In reality, nobody blamed him. The 3 survivors were universally regarded as lucky, not culpable. But reality didn't matter. Valentin's brain had constructed a narrative where his survival was a moral failure, where he owed a debt he could never repay. The psychologist tried cognitive behavioral therapy, medication, support groups. Nothing helped. Valentin's last session with the researcher was in 2000. He said, "Every day I wake up and I'm still here, and they're still dead, and I don't know why. I don't know why I get to live." The researcher noted, patient expresses persistent survivor guilt, suicidal ideation without active plan. Prognosis poor. 6 months later, Valentin stopped returning calls. The researcher tried to locate him for follow-up in 2010, discovered he died the previous year. No further contact was possible. Jesus Robles, the second survivor, ended up on the street. His descent was documented by a homeless outreach worker in a Bronx shelter who recognized him from news footage in 2003, 13 years after the fire. Jesus was living under the Cross Bronx Expressway, part of a small encampment of men who'd lost everything to addiction, mental illness, or both. He'd been there for maybe 6 months, nobody knew exactly. Kept to himself mostly, didn't panhandle, didn't cause trouble, just existed. The outreach worker approached him, offered services, shelter bed, shower, hot meal, case management. Jesus refused, said he didn't deserve help. The worker asked why. Jesus said, "I left them. They were screaming and I left them." Took the worker a few minutes to understand he was talking about Happy Land. Jesus had been carrying that for 13 years, amplified by untreated PTSD and self-medication with alcohol and crack cocaine. Between 1990 and 2003, Jesus's life had disintegrated in stages. Lost his delivery job in 1991, kept missing work due to panic attacks, got fired. Tried other jobs, couldn't hold them. Started drinking heavily, progressed to harder drugs. Evicted from his apartment in 1993 for unpaid rent. Bounced between shelters and friends' couches for a few years. Cut ties with family in 1996. His mother tried to help, he pushed her away, said he didn't want to burden her with his problems. By 2000, he was homeless full-time. By 2003, living under the expressway in a plywood shanty with a tarp roof. The outreach worker tried multiple times to connect him with services. Jesus refused everything. He told the worker, "I should have died that night. Everyone else did. Why am I still here?" The worker wrote in his intake notes, "Client expresses suicidal ideation, but no immediate plan. Declined services. Will follow up next week." There was no follow-up. Jesus disappeared from the encampment in late 2003. The other residents said he just walked away one day, didn't take his belongings, didn't say goodbye, never came back. No death certificate was ever filed, no missing person report. He's either dead somewhere, body never identified, buried in Potter's Field, or he moved to another city, started over, lived anonymously. The outreach worker checked periodically for years, never found any trace. Jesus Robles effectively vanished. Luz Peña, the bartender, was the only survivor who stayed in New York and maintained any semblance of a public life. She gave occasional interviews, local TV, community papers, on anniversaries of the fire, became an advocate for fire safety regulations, testified at city council hearings about the need for stricter building codes and better enforcement, spoke at schools about fire safety, helped draft legislation requiring sprinkler systems in assembly spaces. Her advocacy mattered, led to real changes in city policy, but her personal life was wreckage. The PTSD manifested as hypervigilance. She couldn't enter any room without locating all exits, couldn't sleep without checking locks multiple times, couldn't be in crowds without panic attacks. She tried therapy, medication, support groups. Some days were better than others. Most days were bad. She stopped working in 1992. The panic attacks made it impossible to hold a job. Applied for disability benefits. Denied twice on the grounds that she was physically capable of work. Appealed. Finally approved on the third try in 1994. Received $874 a month in SSI payments. Lived in a single-room occupancy hotel on Webster Avenue. $600 a month rent. Shared bathroom down the hall. The room was 10 feet by 12 feet. Same size as a prison cell. Window looked onto an air shaft, no natural light. She stayed there because she couldn't afford anywhere else. She kept participating in advocacy work when she could manage it. Gave a powerful testimony at a 1995 city council hearing that led directly to new fire safety legislation. Spoke at the 5-year anniversary memorial in 1995, the 10-year in 2000, the 15-year in 2005. By 2008, her health was failing. Decades of smoking, stress, poverty taking their toll. Diagnosed with lung cancer in January 2011. Stage 4. Metastasized to lymph nodes and liver. Given 3 to 6 months. She died on August 14, 2011, at Bronx Lebanon Hospital, the same hospital where she'd worked as a nurse before the fire. She was 49. Her obituary in the Bronx Times described her as a survivor of the 1990 Happy Land fire and advocate for fire safety reform. It didn't mention that she'd spent the last 8 years of her life essentially imprisoned by memory, that she'd outlived the fire by 21 years, but never really escaped it, that every anniversary was torture, that she'd told a reporter in 2010, "I think about it every single day. Every single day I think about the people who didn't make it out. I don't know why I did." Her funeral was attended by 17 people, a few distant relatives, some fellow advocates, a reporter who'd covered her story. No flowers. She'd requested no flowers, asked that any donations go to fire safety education programs. Her body was cremated, ashes scattered in Van Cortlandt Park. No headstone, no memorial. She wanted to disappear, had said as much. Wanted to be forgotten so she could finally stop remembering. Walk through the South Bronx today, and you'll see a neighborhood transformed. Gentrification hasn't quite reached Southern Boulevard, not yet, but it's coming. New construction sprouting up on Jerome Avenue, on the Grand Concourse. Coffee shops with $6 lattes, in neighborhoods where coffee used to mean bodega coffee, in a blue paper cup for 50 cents. Juice bars selling acai bowls for $12. Yoga studios, artisanal bakeries, wine bars. The old bodegas remain, squeezed between new development, but the clientele is changing. Young professionals priced out of Manhattan and Brooklyn. Artists looking for studio space they can afford. The demographic shift is slow but relentless. The Honduran and Dominican communities that filled Happyland's dance floor, many are gone. Pushed out by rent increases that made the Bronx unaffordable. Returned home after decades of struggle, or moved to cheaper areas in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia. The building where Lydia lived, the studio on Prospect Avenue that used to rent for $400 a month, now goes for $1,600. Nobody who worked at Happyland could afford to live in that neighborhood today. But if you know where to look, you can still find traces of 1990. The Amoco station where Julio bought the gasoline is now a Sunoco. Different owner, different branding, same location. Same bulletproof glass separating the attendant from customers. Same fluorescent lights making the night seem harsh and artificial. The payphone Lydia used to call home is gone. All the payphones are gone, replaced by smartphones and constant connectivity. The bodega where men stood smoking while Happyland burned is still there. Same family running it, though the son is in charge now, not the father. They remember. If you ask, and most people don't, they'll tell you about the morning they woke up to fire trucks and news crews, about the families wailing in the street, about the smell that lasted for weeks. They don't bring it up unprompted. Nobody wants to dwell. The neighborhood is trying to move forward, trying to become something new. The past doesn't help with that. The memorial services continue. Every March 25th, families gather at the plaque outside the building that replaced Happyland. The building is called Casa Esperanza, House of Hope, which feels either appropriate or grotesque, depending on your perspective. 6 stories, red brick, ground floor retail space that's been vacant since 2005, despite being in a supposedly up-and-coming neighborhood. Nobody wants to rent commercial space where 87 people died. Bad optics, bad energy, bad luck. The plaque near the entrance is easy to miss if you're not looking for it. Bronze, maybe 18 inches square, mounted at chest height on the brick wall next to the main door. It reads, "In memory of the 87 lives lost in the Happyland fire, March 25th, 1990. Never forgotten." Below that, no names, just the number, 87. The building's current residents mostly don't know the history. The management company doesn't advertise it. The lease agreements don't mention it. People move in, live their lives, never know they're sleeping above ground where people died in terror and agony. But every March 25th, someone leaves flowers at the plaque, sometimes many someones, roses mostly, plastic-wrapped bouquets from the bodega down the street, $10 for a dozen. Carnations, lilies, sometimes single stems placed carefully against the wall. By March 26th, they're gone. Removed by building maintenance, thrown away. The next year they appear again. This has happened for 35 years now. Will probably continue as long as anyone remembers, as long as anyone cares. The gatherings have gotten smaller. In 1991, on the first anniversary, over 300 people showed up. By 2000, maybe 100. By 2010, maybe 50. Last year, 2024, maybe 20. Mostly older people now. Siblings of victims, Parents who have aged into their 70s and 80s, a few childhood friends. The children of victims don't always come. They've built lives separate from the tragedy, moved away, decided that annual grief isn't productive. Can't blame them. Carrying that weight for 35 years is too much to ask. Sometimes 50 people, sometimes 10. Some years, only 3 or 4. The ones who can't let go or won't let go or haven't figured out the difference. They bring flowers, light candles, votives in glass holders, the kind that burn for hours. Say prayers in Spanish, sometimes in English. A priest from St. Jerome's Catholic Church on Alexander Avenue usually shows up, offers a short blessing. The same priest for the last 12 years, Father Miguel, young guy. Wasn't even born when the fire happened, but understands the weight of it. He speaks for maybe 5 minutes, talks about memory, loss, the importance of honoring the dead, the hope that they've found peace. The crowd responds with, "Amen." Then everyone goes home. The whole ceremony takes maybe 20 minutes. It's not enough. It'll never be enough. But it's something. The families of the victims scattered across decades like seeds in wind. Some stayed in the Bronx, anchored by other children, jobs, mortgages, lives too entrenched to abandon. Others left, moved to New Jersey where rent was cheaper, to Pennsylvania where factory jobs still existed, back to Honduras if they could afford it, if they had anything to return to. Maria Santos's mother went back to Tegucigalpa in 1992, took her grandchildren with her, raised Gabriela and Miguel Jr. in the same house where Maria had grown up. The kids are grown now, have families of their own. They visit Maria's grave every year, tell their own children about the grandmother they never met. Carlos Ramirez's mother, Eduardo's widow, stayed in the Bronx. Couldn't afford to leave, couldn't bear to stay. Worked as a home health aide for 20 years, caring for elderly patients in their apartments for $12 an hour. Never remarried, died in 2018, aged 74. Her obituary listed her husband and son among her predeceased relatives, reunited with Eduardo and Carlos. That's the kind of sentiment that helps people cope, the idea that death means reunion. Nobody knows if it's true, but it helps. Rosa Martinez's children were raised by their aunt, not Sophia, who died in the fire, but another sister who lived in Queens. 3 kids who lost their mother, raised by an aunt who'd lost 2 sisters. They turned out okay, mostly. Went to college, got jobs, started families. But holidays are complicated. Mother's Day is hard. March 25th is impossible. They've learned to navigate grief, to carry it without letting it crush them. But it's always there. The community that had filled Happy Land every Saturday night dissolved like sugar in water. The other social clubs in the area, there had been maybe 20 operating in the South Bronx in 1990, closed voluntarily or were shut down by the city's task force. Mayor Dinkins's social club task force, formed 3 days after the fire, conducted inspections throughout the borough, found violations everywhere, blocked exits, no sprinklers, overcrowding, electrical hazards, structural problems. Within 2 years, 215 illegal clubs in the Bronx had been shut down. The music and the gatherings moved into private homes, church basements, rented halls with proper permits and fire exits and occupancy limits. Safer, definitely. Legal, yes. But something was lost, that feeling of sanctuary, of a place that was yours, that didn't ask for ID or judge where you came from, or charge $20 at the door with a 2-drink minimum. Happy Land had cost $5 to enter. Beer was $3. You could dance until dawn without anyone hassling you. That doesn't exist anymore. Probably can't exist anymore, not legally, not safely. But its absence leaves a hole. Lydia Feliciano Rodriguez gave a single television interview in 1991, 1 year after the fire. Local news, Channel 7, anniversary coverage. She sat on a couch in a studio in Manhattan, across from a reporter whose name is lost to time, who probably doesn't remember the interview among thousands of others. Lydia wore a dark blue dress, her hair pulled back the way she always wore it. Her hands shook throughout. The reporter asked her how she was doing. Lydia said, "I'm alive, that's all." Asked about Julio, she said, "I don't think about him. If I think about him, I'll go crazy." Asked about her sister Anna, she cried. Didn't answer, just cried, couldn't speak. The interview ended early. Lydia stood up, removed the microphone clipped to her collar, and walked off camera. The footage shows her disappearing into the hallway behind the set. After that, she vanished from public record. No forwarding address, no social media presence. This was before social media existed, before you could Google someone and find their life story. No obituary when she presumably died sometime in the 2000s or 2020. Her cousin Rosa, who still lives in the Bronx, refuses interview requests, has for 30 years. A private investigator hired by a documentary filmmaker in 2015 couldn't locate Lydia. Checked databases, contacted the Social Security Administration, searched property records. Nothing. Either she's still alive somewhere under a different name, changed it legally, started over, erased her past, or she's dead and nobody reported it. Both possibilities seem equally sad, equally possible. The 3 survivors who escaped through the transom window became case studies in trauma research, subjects of longitudinal studies, examples in psychology textbooks. But they were also just people who saw something no one should see, who carried something no one should have to carry, who survived when 87 others didn't and never understood why. Valentin Salas was tracked by researchers until 2000, then vanished. Jesus Robles ended up homeless, disappeared completely by 2003. Luz Peña stayed public, advocated for change, died in 2011, never having escaped the memories. 3 people who fit through a 12 by 30-inch window. 3 people who happened to be in the right place at the right second. 3 people whose survival was random chance, nothing more. They weren't heroes. They didn't save anyone else. They just climbed and squeezed and fell and lived while everyone around them died. And that fact destroyed them almost as thoroughly as the fire destroyed their friends. Julio González's legacy is institutional, procedural, legal. The Happyland fire led directly to the creation of the Mayor's Office of Nightlife, though not until 2017, 27 years after the fact. Different mayor, different city. The office was created to regulate nightlife venues, ensure safety compliance, prevent exactly what happened at Happyland. Better late than never, though tell that to the 87 families. It prompted sweeping building code reforms in 1991, mandatory sprinkler systems in assembly spaces, multiple exits clearly marked, capacity limits actually enforced, with fire marshals conducting random inspections. The cost to business owners was significant. Retrofitting sprinkler systems alone cost between $10,000 and $50,000, depending on building size. Many small venues couldn't afford it, went out of business. But lives were saved. How many? Nobody can say. Statistics don't measure the fires that didn't happen, the stampedes that were prevented by having 2 doors instead of 1, the deaths avoided because a sprinkler system activated before smoke could spread. The Social Club Task Force, formed by Mayor Dinkins in the aftermath, shut down 215 illegal clubs in the Bronx alone between 1990 and 1992. Citywide, the number was higher, maybe 400, maybe 500. Nobody kept perfect count. Some reopened months later with better safety measures, legitimate permits. Some never reopened. The spaces became bodegas, laundromats, storage units. The communities that had gathered in them found other places to meet, other ways to survive. Did Julio understand what he'd done? In his last interview before his death, conducted by a prison psychologist in 2014 as part of a routine evaluation, he said, "I think about it every day. I see their faces. I don't know if that's real or my imagination." The psychologist asked, "Which faces?" Julio said, "All of them. People I never met. I see them in the smoke." He asked if Julio felt guilt. Julio said, "What difference does it make? They're dead. I'm in here. Nothing changes." The psychologist noted in his report that Julio displayed flat affect, possible dissociative disorder, absence of genuine emotional connection to the severity of his actions. In layman's terms, he knew it was bad. Everyone told him it was bad, but he couldn't feel how bad. His brain had simply shut down that part of himself, walled it off, made it unreachable. Julio González died on November 3, 2016, at Attica Correctional Facility in upstate New York. He was 62 years old. Cause of death? Coronary artery disease, heart attack. He'd been in prison for 26 years by then, had spent most of his adult life behind walls. He'd arrived young enough that his hair had gone gray in prison. His face had aged in the particular way that incarceration ages people. Hollowed out, diminished, stripped of whatever light had once been there. He never appealed his conviction, never maintained his innocence, never expressed anything that could be interpreted as genuine remorse to anyone who wrote it down. His death warranted a single paragraph in the New York Times. Julio González, 62, who was convicted of setting a fire at an unlicensed social club in the Bronx that killed 87 people in 1990, died of natural causes at Attica Correctional Facility. He had been serving 174 years to life. No further comment from the prison, no further comment from the family. He had no family. Nobody claimed his body. It was cremated by the state, standard procedure for inmates who die without next of kin. The ashes were placed in a container and held at the prison until someone claimed them. Nobody did. They're still there, in a storage facility somewhere in the Attica system. An unclaimed container among other unclaimed containers, the final resting place of a man who ended 87 lives because one woman wouldn't talk to him. Here's the question that still hangs over the Bronx, over the families, over anyone who's read this far. How do you measure the weight of a moment that lasted 90 seconds but erased entire family trees? How do you quantify the children who were never born because their parents died at 23, at 19, at 34? The grandchildren who don't exist. The weddings that didn't happen. Sophia's June wedding, the white dress still hanging in her closet when they cleaned out her apartment. The graduations that were supposed to happen. Carlos's ceremony at CUNY Lehman. The family planning to fill an entire section of seats. The birthdays, the anniversaries, the ordinary accumulations of life that add up to a human existence. Maria Santos had 2 kids who grew up without a mother. Gabriela is 39 now, works as a nurse. Her mother had been studying to become one. Miguel Jr. is 37, teaches elementary school in Honduras. Carlos Ramirez never went to college, never studied computer science, never became the first in his family to graduate. Eduardo Ramirez never walked his son down any aisle, never saw Carlos at a graduation, never fulfilled the promise he'd made to his dead wife. Rosa Martinez's students never learned from her again. A classroom full of 3rd graders in September 1990 found a substitute teacher instead. We're told only that Mrs. Martinez wouldn't be back. Sofia Martinez's fiancé, Luis, waited by the phone for a call that never came. Called the hospital at 4 a.m., was told to come to the morgue, identified her body at 6 a.m., saw the engagement ring still on her finger, couldn't speak for 3 weeks after that, never remarried, never removed the ring from his pocket where he kept it. 87 people, 90 seconds, 1 match. That's the arithmetic of Happy Land. But arithmetic doesn't capture what was lost. It doesn't account for all the moments that should have happened but didn't, all the love that got cut short, all the futures that ended before they started. And it doesn't answer the real question, the one that keeps families up at night, the one that historians and psychologists and priests have struggled with for 35 years. In a city of 8 million people, in a country built on the idea that everyone gets a shot at something better, why does it take 87 deaths for anyone to notice that people are living and dying in fire traps because they have nowhere else to go? The plaque outside 1959 Southern Boulevard doesn't answer that question. Neither does this story. All we can do is remember and make sure it doesn't happen again, and know that it probably will, somewhere, sometime. Because the math of desperation and poverty and indifference never changes. Julio González lit the match, but the world built the tinderbox.